I remember the exact moment I realized my entire life had been stolen. Not in pieces, not gradually, but completely, systematically, and by the one person I would have trusted with my dying breath. I was standing in the marble lobby of a building I had designed, funded, and built from nothing, and a security guard I had never seen before was telling me I was trespassing. He said the name on the deed belonged to someone else. He said I needed to leave before he called the police. And when I looked up at the brass lettering above the reception desk, I saw my company's name. The name I had chosen when I was 23 years old in a cramped apartment with nothing but a laptop and a dream. And I realized that everything underneath that name now belonged to Danny Russo. My best friend since we were 7 years old. The man I had loved like a brother. The man who had just stolen $1 billion using my identity, my signature, and my trust. But I am getting ahead of myself. If I am going to tell you this story, and I need to tell it because the weight of carrying it alone has been crushing me for 3 years, then I need to start at the beginning. I need you to understand who Danny was to me. I need you to understand what he took. And I need you to understand exactly how I took it all back without breaking a single law. I grew up in a small town in Ohio called Millbrook. Population 8,000, one main street, 2 traffic lights. The kind of place where everyone knows your business and nobody leaves. My parents died in a car accident when I was 6 years old. A drunk driver crossed the median on Highway 71 and hit them head-on. I do not remember the funeral. I do not remember the weeks after. What I remember is waking up in a strange house that smelled like mothballs and realizing that my grandmother, a woman I had met maybe 3 times in my life, was now responsible for raising me. Grandma Webb was not cruel, but she was not warm either. She fed me. She clothed me. She made sure I went to school. But she never hugged me. She never told me she loved me. She never made me feel like I belonged anywhere. I spent most of my childhood feeling like a ghost, invisible to the world, drifting through days that all felt exactly the same. And then I met Danny Russo. It was the first day of 2nd grade. I was sitting alone at lunch, same as always, eating a peanut butter sandwich that my grandmother had made without cutting off the crusts, because she said waste was a sin. A kid with dark curly hair and a gap-toothed smile walked up to my table, sat down across from me without asking, and said, "You look like you need a friend." I did not know what to say. Nobody had ever just chosen me before. Nobody had ever looked at me and decided I was worth knowing. "I am Danny," he said. "My dad says I talk too much, but I think that is because he does not have anything interesting to say. Do you like baseball?" I nodded, even though I had never played. "Good," Danny said. "You are on my team now." And just like that, I had a best friend. The Russo family was everything my grandmother was not. Danny's mother, Maria, hugged me every time I walked through their door. His father, Frank, taught me how to throw a spiral, and how to change a tire, and how to shake a man's hand like I meant it. They had money, real money, and their house was always warm and full of laughter. I spent more time there than I did at my grandmother's, and Danny, for reasons I never fully understood, treated me like I was his brother. We did everything together. We played on the same little league team. We sat next to each other in every class. We had sleepovers every weekend. When I got into fights because kids made fun of me for being an orphan, Danny was always the first one throwing punches beside me. When I failed a math test in 8th grade and my grandmother called me worthless, Danny snuck out of his house at midnight, climbed through my window, and told me that I was the smartest person he knew. He said I was going to do something great someday. He said he would be right there beside me when I did. I believed him. God help me. I believed every word. We went to different colleges. Danny got into Northwestern on his family's connections and studied finance. I got a scholarship to Carnegie Mellon and studied computer science. But we stayed close. We talked every week. We visited each other on breaks. And when I started working on a software project during my senior year, something that would eventually become the foundation of my entire company, Danny was the first person I told. The idea was simple, at least in concept. I wanted to create an artificial intelligence platform that could analyze financial data faster and more accurately than any human. Banks, hedge funds, investment firms, they were all making decisions based on outdated information and human bias. My software would change that. It would process millions of data points in seconds. It would identify patterns that humans could never see. It would revolutionize the industry. I called it Meridian. Danny loved it. He said it was going to make us both rich. He said we were going to build something together. And when I graduated and moved to San Francisco to work on Meridian full-time, Danny followed 6 months later with a freshly minted MBA and a promise to handle everything I did not understand about business. We were partners, 50-50. That was the deal. I would build the technology. Danny would build the company. Together, we would change the world. And for a while, that is exactly what we did. The first 5 years were hard. We lived in a one-bedroom apartment that we split down the middle with a curtain made from bed sheets. We worked 18-hour days. We ate ramen noodles and cold pizza and whatever we could scrounge from the dumpster behind the bakery on 4th Street. We pitched to investors who laughed us out of their offices. We got rejected more times than I can count, but I kept building. And Danny kept selling. And slowly, investor by investor, client by client, Meridian started to grow. By the time we were 30, we had 100 employees and offices in 3 cities. By 32, we were valued at $500 million. And by 34, the year everything fell apart, Meridian was worth just over $1 billion. We had contracts with Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, and Bank of America. We had government contracts. We had a board of directors filled with some of the most powerful people in Silicon Valley. And through it all, Danny was right there beside me, just like he promised. I thought I knew him. I thought I understood who he was at his core. But the truth is, I only knew the version of Danny that he wanted me to see. The real Danny, the one hiding behind that gap-toothed smile and those easy promises, was someone else entirely. Someone darker, someone hungrier, someone who had been planning to take everything from me for longer than I ever could have imagined. The first sign of trouble came on a Tuesday in March, 3 years ago. I was in my office, the corner office on the 42nd floor of the building I had designed, going over quarterly reports when my assistant buzzed me. "Mr. Webb, there is a Claire Ashford here to see you. She says it is urgent." I knew Claire. She was a corporate lawyer at Whitmore and Associates, one of the top firms in the city. We had used them for a few minor contracts over the years, but I had never worked with her directly. Still, I knew her reputation. She was sharp, ruthless, the kind of lawyer who could make you feel like you were being cross-examined during a casual conversation. "Send her in," I said. Claire walked into my office with a file folder in her hands and a look on her face that I would later come to recognize as pity. "Mr. Webb," she said, sitting down across from me without being invited, "I need you to look at something." She slid the folder across my desk. I opened it. Inside was a document I did not recognize. It was a transfer agreement. According to the paperwork, I had authorized the movement of $200 million from Meridian's primary operating account into an offshore holding company registered in the Cayman Islands. My signature was on the bottom of the page. I stared at it for a long time. My hands were shaking. "I did not sign this," I said. "I know," Claire said. "That is why I am here." She explained that she had been reviewing Meridian's financial documents as part of a routine audit requested by one of our institutional investors. She had found the transfer agreement buried in a pile of paperwork that had been marked as routine operational expenses. She had almost missed it, but something about the signature had caught her eye. The M in my last name was wrong. It was close, almost perfect, but the tail curved in the wrong direction. She had seen my real signature enough times to notice. "Who authorized this?" I asked. Claire looked at me with those sharp, knowing eyes. "The only person with access to these accounts besides you is your partner," she said. "Daniel Russo." I wanted to laugh. I wanted to tell her she was wrong. Danny would never steal from me. Danny would never forge my signature. Danny was my brother. He had been with me since the beginning. He had built this company beside me. But then I thought about the last few months. The way Danny had been acting, distant, secretive, always leaving for meetings that he never told me about, always taking calls in the hallway where I could not hear. I had written it off as stress. Running a billion-dollar company was hard. We were both exhausted. But what if it was something else? What if the person I trusted most in the world was not who I thought he was? "There is more," Claire said. She pulled another document from her bag. "This is a partnership agreement dated 4 months ago. It transfers controlling interest of Meridian from your name to a shell company called Cobalt Holdings. The majority shareholder of Cobalt Holdings is Daniel Russo." I could not breathe. The room was spinning. I looked at the signature on the bottom of the agreement. It was perfect. Every loop, every curve, every flourish. It was my handwriting. Except I had never seen this document before in my life. "This is fraud," I said. "This is identity theft. This is a billion-dollar heist," Claire said quietly. "And your best friend is the one who did it." I do not remember much of what happened after that. I know Claire kept talking. I know she told me that she was not supposed to be showing me any of this, that she could lose her job, that she had only come because something about the whole situation felt wrong. I know she gave me her card and told me to call her if I wanted help. But mostly, I just sat there in my corner office, staring at the city lights through the window, trying to understand how the person I loved most in the world could do something like this. When Claire left, I did what any rational person would do. I denied it. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Danny would never betray me. This was a mistake, a misunderstanding, a clerical error. I would talk to him in the morning and we would sort it out and everything would go back to normal. But normal was already gone. I just did not know it yet. That night, I did not sleep. I sat in my apartment, the apartment I now shared with no one because I had been too busy building Meridian to build a life, and I read through every document Claire had given me. The more I read, the worse it got. The 200 million was just the beginning. Over the past 18 months, Danny had been systematically draining Meridian's accounts through a network of shell companies and offshore trusts. He had forged my signature on dozens of documents. He had created fake contracts and false invoices. He had paid himself consulting fees that I had never approved. He had sold company assets to himself at fractions of their actual value. And he had done it all so carefully, so methodically, that no one had noticed until Claire stumbled onto that one imperfect signature. By my calculations, Danny had stolen nearly $800 million. And according to the documents Claire had shown me, he was positioning himself to take the rest. The partnership agreement transferring control to Cobalt Holdings was set to activate in 30 days. Once that happened, Danny would own Meridian outright. He would be able to fire me, sell the company, and walk away with everything I had ever built. I wanted to confront him. I wanted to burst into his office and demand answers. But something stopped me. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was disbelief. Or maybe it was the small, cold voice in the back of my mind that said if I tipped him off too early, I would lose any chance I had of stopping him. So I waited. And I watched. And I started to see things I had been blind to for years. The next morning, I went to the office like nothing had happened. I sat in meetings. I answered emails. I smiled at Danny when he walked by my desk. But the whole time, I was paying attention in a way I never had before. I noticed how Danny always positioned himself between me and the finance team. I noticed how he controlled what information I saw and when I saw it. I noticed how he had slowly, over the years, convinced me to delegate more and more of the business operations to him while I focused on the technical side. At the time, it had seemed natural. Danny was better at business. I was better at code. We were playing to our strengths. But now I understood. Danny had not been helping me. He had been isolating me. He had built a wall between me and my own company, brick by brick, until I was standing on the outside without even realizing it. 3 days after Claire's visit, I did something I should have done years earlier. I hired my own auditor. His name was Victor Okonkwo. He was 60 years old, retired from the FBI, and he had spent 30 years tracking white-collar criminals who thought they were too smart to get caught. He was not flashy, he was not loud, he was patient and methodical and absolutely relentless. When I explained what was happening, he listened without interrupting. When I showed him the documents, he studied them in silence for nearly an hour. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm. "Your friend is good," Victor said. "Very good. This level of fraud takes years to set up. He has been planning this since before your company was worth anything." "How do I stop him?" I asked. Victor looked at me with those wise, tired eyes. "You do not stop him," he said. "You let him finish. You let him think he has won. And then you burn everything he built to the ground." I did not understand what he meant. Not yet. But over the next 6 months, Victor taught me everything I needed to know about patience, strategy, and the art of legal revenge. The first thing Victor explained was that going to the police would be a mistake. Danny had covered his tracks too well. The forged signatures were nearly perfect. The shell companies were registered in jurisdictions that did not cooperate with American investigators. The paper trail was so convoluted that it would take years to untangle. And by then, Danny would be long gone. Instead, Victor proposed something different. He called it the long game. "Your friend has one weakness," Victor said. "He thinks he is smarter than everyone else. He thinks he has planned for every possibility. But he has not planned for you. He does not see you as a threat because he does not respect you. He never has. That is why he was able to betray you in the first place, and that is why you are going to destroy him." The plan was elegant in its simplicity. We would not try to stop Danny from stealing the company. We would let him take it. We would let him activate the partnership agreement and transfer control to Cobalt Holdings. We would let him believe he had gotten away with everything. And then we would expose him. Not to the police, not to lawyers, to everyone. But first, we needed evidence. Real evidence. The kind that could not be dismissed or explained away. The kind that would make it impossible for Danny to escape the consequences of what he had done. So I became a spy in my own company. I started staying late. I volunteered for projects I had never been interested in before. I asked questions about the financial side of the business, questions that Danny usually answered with vague assurances and corporate jargon. And every night, after everyone else had gone home, I searched. I found things in places Danny never expected me to look. Emails between him and lawyers in the Cayman Islands, discussing how to move money without triggering reporting requirements. Text messages to someone named M, talking about the timeline and when everything would be locked down. A folder on a shared drive, hidden inside a subfolder inside another subfolder, containing scans of every forged document he had used. But the most damaging thing I found was a recording. Danny had always been paranoid about being recorded by others, but apparently he had no problem recording himself. On a backup server that I had helped design years earlier, I discovered an audio file dated 6 months before Claire's visit. It was Danny, talking to someone I did not recognize, explaining exactly what he planned to do. "Marcus is brilliant, but he is naive," Danny's voice said on the recording. "He trusts me completely. He always has. By the time he figures out what happened, the money will be in Zurich and I will be on a beach somewhere, living the life he was too soft to take for himself." I listened to that recording 17 times. Each time I heard something new. The contempt in Danny's voice, the casual cruelty, the absolute certainty that I would never see him for who he really was. I saved everything. I made copies. I stored them in places Danny would never think to look. And I waited. The day the partnership agreement activated, I was sitting in a coffee shop across the street from the Meridian building. I watched through the window as Danny walked in, briefcase in hand, wearing the same confident smile he had worn since we were kids. He had no idea what was coming. He thought this was the beginning of his new life. But it was actually the end of everything he had built. That afternoon, he called a meeting of the board of directors. I was not invited. According to the new ownership structure, I was no longer a stakeholder in the company I had created. I was just another employee, easily dismissed, easily replaced, but I was not dismissed. Not yet. Danny was too smart for that. He knew that firing me immediately would raise questions. So he kept me around, gave me busy work, treated me like I was a valued member of the team. All the while, he was selling off pieces of the company, moving money into his offshore accounts, preparing to disappear. He thought he had all the time in the world. He was wrong. 3 weeks after Danny took control of Meridian, I started my counteroffensive. The first step was Claire. We had been meeting in secret for months, and somewhere along the way, our professional relationship had become something more. She was smart and fierce, and she saw me in a way that no one else ever had. She believed in me when I was at my lowest. She helped me understand that what was happening was not my fault, that I was not weak or stupid for trusting someone I loved. And she used every resource at her disposal to help me build a case that Danny could not escape. Through Claire's connections, I hired a team of forensic accountants who specialized in international financial crimes. They traced Danny's money through 17 different shell companies across 8 countries. They documented every transaction, every transfer, every lie. And they did it all quietly, without Danny ever knowing. The second step was the media. I had a contact at the Wall Street Journal, a reporter named Eliza Chen, who had interviewed me years earlier when Meridian first started getting attention. I reached out to her. I told her I had a story, a big one, the kind that would make careers. Eliza was skeptical at first. Danny was a respected figure in the tech and finance worlds. He was charming and articulate, and he had spent years cultivating relationships with journalists who would give him favorable coverage. But when I showed her the evidence, when I played her the recording of Danny explaining exactly how he planned to steal my company, her skepticism turned to fury. "This is criminal," she said. "He should be in prison." "He will be," I said. "But first, I want him destroyed." Eliza agreed to hold the story until I gave her the go-ahead. She understood that timing was everything. If the story broke too early, Danny would have a chance to spin it, to claim he was the victim of a misunderstanding or a vendetta. But if we waited until the right moment, until the evidence was overwhelming and the narrative was impossible to deny, there would be nothing he could do. The third step was the most delicate. I needed someone inside Danny's inner circle, someone who knew what he was doing and was willing to talk. That someone turned out to be his wife, Samantha. I had known Samantha for years. She and Danny had gotten married 5 years earlier, a lavish ceremony at a vineyard in Napa Valley. I had been the best man. I had given a toast about how Danny was the most loyal friend I had ever known, how I was certain he would be just as loyal to Samantha. Every word of that toast now felt like a knife in my gut, but Samantha, I would learn, had her own reasons to feel betrayed. We met at a coffee shop in a neighborhood where neither of us would be recognized. Samantha looked tired. There were shadows under her eyes, and she kept glancing over her shoulder like she was afraid of being followed. "I know why you are here," she said before I could say anything. "I know what Danny did to you." "You knew?" I asked, and I could not keep the hurt out of my voice. Samantha shook her head. "Not all of it, not at first. But I started putting things together about 6 months ago. The secret meetings, the phone calls in the middle of the night, the way he would disappear for days and come back with cash he could not explain." She looked down at her hands. "I thought he was having an affair. I wish that was all it was." She told me that Danny had been distant for years. Cold. Dismissive. He treated her more like an accessory than a partner. And when she started asking questions about his finances, about where the money was coming from, he had threatened her. "He said if I told anyone, he would ruin me," Samantha said. "He said he would make sure I never worked again, that no one would believe me, that I would lose everything." Her voice cracked. "I have a daughter, Marcus. She is 3 years old. I cannot let Danny destroy her life too." I took her hands in mine. "Help me," I said. "Help me stop him." And I promise, when this is over, you and your daughter will be taken care of." Samantha hesitated. I could see the fear in her eyes, the years of manipulation and control that Danny had used to keep her silent. But I could also see something else: anger, determination, the same fire that I felt burning in my own chest. "What do you need?" she asked. Over the next 2 months, Samantha became my most valuable asset. She had access to Danny's personal accounts, his private emails, his hidden safes. She copied documents while he slept. She recorded conversations when he thought no one was listening. She was taking an enormous risk, and she did it because she wanted her daughter to grow up knowing that her mother was brave enough to do the right thing. One of the things Samantha discovered was that Danny was not just stealing from me. He was stealing from everyone. He had defrauded investors. He had lied to the board of directors. He had even been skimming money from the charitable foundation that Meridian had established to fund education programs in underserved communities. Millions of dollars that were supposed to go to schools and scholarships had ended up in Danny's offshore accounts instead. When I saw the evidence, I felt a new kind of rage. Stealing from me was one thing, but stealing from children, from families who had nothing, that was something else entirely. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place on a rainy Thursday in November. Samantha called me, her voice shaking. "He is leaving," she said. "He booked a one-way ticket to Switzerland. He leaves in 48 hours. I had always known this moment would come. Danny had always planned to disappear once he had extracted everything he could from Meridian. But I had hoped we would have more time. We needed just a few more days to finalize everything. I called Victor. I called Claire. I called Eliza. And then I made a decision that would change everything. "We go tonight," I said. The operation we launched was unlike anything I could have imagined 3 years earlier. It started at midnight, coordinated across 3 time zones. Claire filed an emergency motion with the Securities and Exchange Commission, presenting evidence of securities fraud and financial misconduct. The documents were damning: forged signatures, falsified financial statements, a pattern of deception that stretched back years. At the same time, Victor's team reached out to their contacts at the FBI. They presented evidence of wire fraud, identity theft, and money laundering. An investigation was opened within hours. But the most important blow came from Eliza Chen. At exactly 6 o'clock in the morning, the Wall Street Journal published a story that would dominate headlines for weeks. The title was simple: "Meridian Founder Accused of Billion-Dollar Fraud." The article detailed Danny's scheme in exhaustive detail. It included excerpts from the recording I had discovered. It quoted Samantha, who had agreed to go on the record despite the risks. And it painted a picture of a man who had betrayed everyone who had ever trusted him. I watched from my apartment as the story spread. Within an hour, it was on every major news network. Within 3 hours, Meridian's stock had plummeted. Within 6 hours, the board of directors had issued a statement announcing that Danny had been removed from his position and that a full investigation was underway. Danny never made it to Switzerland. He was arrested at San Francisco International Airport, just steps away from the gate. I was told that he looked confused at first, like he could not understand what was happening. He had been so certain that he was untouchable. He had been so certain that I would never figure it out. But he was wrong. About me. About everything. The trial lasted 4 months. Danny hired the best lawyers money could buy, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. Samantha testified about the abuse and manipulation she had endured. Former employees came forward with stories of his bullying and deception. And I sat in that courtroom every single day, watching as the man I had loved like a brother was exposed for who he truly was. The prosecution painted a picture of a sociopath, someone who had been charming and manipulating people his entire life, someone who saw relationships as transactions and people as tools to be used and discarded. They showed the jury the recording of Danny laughing about how naive I was. They showed them the forged documents. They showed them the trail of destruction he had left behind. Danny's defense tried to blame me. They said I was bitter. They said I was jealous. They said I had manufactured evidence to destroy a successful man who had outgrown me. But the evidence was too strong. The truth was too clear. In the end, the jury deliberated for less than a day. Guilty on all counts: securities fraud, wire fraud, identity theft, money laundering, conspiracy, 23 felony convictions in total. When the verdict was read, Danny turned and looked at me. For a moment, I saw something in his eyes that I had never seen before. Fear. Real fear. He finally understood that he had lost, that all his planning and scheming and manipulation had led him here, to a courtroom where a jury of his peers had seen through every lie. I did not look away. I held his gaze until the bailiffs led him out of the courtroom, and then I closed my eyes and let myself feel, for the first time in 3 years, something other than anger. Danny was sentenced to 42 years in federal prison. Given his age, it was effectively a life sentence. The judge called his crimes a profound betrayal of trust and said that people like Danny represented a threat to the integrity of the financial system. But the story did not end there. With Danny gone, I worked with the SEC and the FBI to recover as much of the stolen money as possible. Through asset forfeiture and international cooperation, we were able to claw back nearly $700 million. The money was used to compensate the defrauded investors and to restore the charitable foundation that Danny had pillaged. Meridian was restructured under new leadership. I chose not to return as CEO. The experience had changed me. I no longer wanted to run a billion-dollar company. I no longer wanted to spend my life in boardrooms and conference calls. Instead, I established a new foundation dedicated to helping victims of financial fraud. We provide legal resources, counseling, and financial assistance to people who have been betrayed by people they trusted. Samantha divorced Danny and received a generous settlement. She and her daughter moved to a small town on the coast, far from the spotlight and the memories. We still talk sometimes. She tells me that her daughter is thriving, that they are building a new life together, that she finally feels free. Claire and I got married last year. It was a small ceremony, just family and a few close friends. Standing at the altar, looking into her eyes, I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. Hope. Real hope. For the future. For the life we were building together. And me? I am different now. Stronger. Wiser. More careful about who I let into my life. I still think about Danny sometimes. Not with anger anymore, but with something closer to sadness. I wonder what happened to the boy who sat down at my lunch table all those years ago. The boy who told me I needed a friend. Was he always a monster, even then? Or did something change along the way? I do not have the answers. Maybe I never will. But I know this. I survived. I fought back. And I won. If you are listening to this and you have been betrayed by someone you loved, someone you trusted, I want you to know that you are not alone. I want you to know that the pain you are feeling is not your fault. And I want you to know that there is a way through this. It may take time. It may take patience. It may take everything you have. But justice is possible. Healing is possible. A new beginning is possible. I am proof of that. The last time I saw Danny was at his sentencing hearing. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit and his wrists were cuffed in front of him. The confidence was gone. The charm was gone. He looked like what he really was, a scared, broken man who had gambled everything on his ability to deceive and had finally lost. Before they took him away, he called my name. I stopped. I turned. And he said something I will never forget. I loved you, Marcus. You have to believe that. I loved you like a brother. I looked at him for a long time. At the face I had known for nearly 30 years. At the eyes that had once seemed so warm and now seemed so empty. No, Danny, I said. You did not. You never did. Because if you loved me, you would not have done this. You would not have stolen my company. You would not have forged my name. you would not have tried to destroy everything I built. I took a step closer to him. Love does not do what you did, I said. Love does not betray. Love does not manipulate. Love does not take everything and leave nothing behind. Danny's face crumpled. For a moment, he looked like the boy I once knew. The boy with the gap-toothed smile who sat down at my lunch table and told me I needed a friend. But that boy was gone. Maybe he had never really existed. Goodbye, Danny, I said, and I walked away. I walked out of that courtroom and into the sunlight. I took a deep breath. I felt the weight of 3 years of betrayal and pain and anger lifting from my shoulders. And I started again. That is the end of my story. But it is also a beginning. Because surviving betrayal is not about revenge. It is not about making someone pay for what they did. It is about reclaiming your life. It is about refusing to let the person who hurt you define who you are. Danny Russo tried to steal everything from me. My company, my identity, my future. And for a while, it felt like he had succeeded. But he did not take the most important thing. He did not take my ability to get back up. He did not take my capacity for love and trust. He did not take my faith in the possibility of justice. I am Marcus Webb. I was betrayed by my best friend, and I won. Not because I am smarter or stronger or better, but because I refused to give up. Because I found people who believed in me. Because I learned that the truth, no matter how painful, is always more powerful than lies. If there is one thing I want you to take away from this story, it is this. You are not defined by what was done to you. You are defined by what you do next. Danny is in a cell right now, surrounded by concrete walls and iron bars, with nothing but time to think about everything he lost. And I am here, in the life I built for myself, surrounded by people who love me, doing work that matters. That is my revenge, not his imprisonment, not his disgrace, but my freedom, my happiness, my refusal to let his betrayal be the end of my story. The sun is setting as I finish telling you this. Claire is in the other room, and I can hear her laughing at something. Our life is good. It is peaceful. It is everything I never dared to hope for during those dark months when I thought I had lost everything. Danny took $1 billion. But in the end, I took something more valuable. I took my life back. And that is a victory no one can ever take from me.